My name is Advocacy, and I'm very excited to chair this year's Jewish Community Relations Council 45th Annual Middle East Institute. The Middle East Institute is our agency's annual conference which seeks to educate our community on issues and topics affecting the Jewish homeland of Israel. In addition, it has become our tradition at this event to honor someone who has done more than most in helping to support and advocate on behalf of Israel by presenting them with the JCRC Israel Advocacy Award. It gives me great pride to know we will undoubtedly be accomplishing both of these objectives this morning. Before I turn the podium over, I would just like to take a moment to recognize some community leaders with us this morning. We have Jen Weiss, CEO of the Jewish Federation, Vicky Zell, past president of JCRC and president-elect of the Jewish Federation, Peggy David, annual campaign chair and JCRC board member, Jonathan Horn, president of the Jewish Community Relations Council, Myra Newton, Hank Moore, past presidents of the Jewish Community Relations Council, Josh Weissman, president, Jewish Community Foundation, Jeff Klein, executive director of the Jewish Community Foundation, Marla Myers, executive director of the Samos Jewish Family and Children's Services, Harriet Schulman, president of the Jewish Community Voice and JCRC board member, Jeff Nash, Camden County freeholder and Federation board member, Rabbi Aaron Krabnik, Congregation Bethel, Eric Kleiman, president of Bethel, Rabbi Moshe Schwartz, head of school at Kelman Brown Academy, Rabbi Louis Aaron, community chaplain, and Rabbi Noah Arno from Congregation Bethel will be joining us a bit later. And last but not least, David Snyder, executive director of the Jewish Community Relations. I would also like to recognize our sponsors without whom this program would not be possible. First, to our two lead sponsors, Steve Bilowitz and Stephen and Eric Miller from M. Rosenblatt Roofing. Thank you for your continued generosity in helping to underwrite JCRC programs in support of Israel. To our benefactors, Stephanie and Steve Cohen, Tanya and Mara Bachman, and Pam and Bob Benedon. We are very grateful for your continued support of JCRC in general and this program in particular. We would also like to thank the law firm of Blank Rome, Ross and Frankel Disability Benefit Attorneys, Brown's Family ShopRite, Amy Clayman and Financial Fluency, Leon Levy and Associates, and Parentive Beer. Don't worry, I'm almost finished. Can I now ask all my fellow JCRC board members to please stand up and be recognized for all your hard work on behalf of the community. I also want to express a special thank you to the South Jersey Men's Club for hosting today's breakfast. I appreciate each of you for taking the time to be with us this morning. And on a personal note, I would like to thank Jonathan Horn, David Snyder, and the whole committee for their help and support for making this program a success. I would like now to call up Rabbi Krabnik to the podium for this morning Torah. Thank you very much and enjoy the program.
Well, Tobin, good morning. It's an honor to be here today to be able to look out at such a large crowd. Great credit to David Snyder and the volunteers who are on the board of the JCRC, that makes our JCRC the envy of those others in the nation. As I travel around, I talk to people about Jewish advocacy in various communities, and Cherry Hill is always high up on the list of people who make a big difference. Honored to be asked to do a short Devar Torah here today. In shuls around the world, next Shabbos will bench Rosh Chodesh. It'll be the second Adar, which means that Purim is only 3 weeks away. If it's not been a leap year, we would have had Purim by this point already. And I begin with Purim on my mind, because I am also here to pay tribute to my friend Bob Benedon. And Bob is known for a great many things in our community. Peerless periodontist who has a wonderful practice and trains the next generation of periodontists as well. Tireless advocate for Jewish education, particularly through Calvin Brown. And of course, the strongest possible advocate for the state of Israel through his work with JCRC and J&M. But what hearts and homes of many Bob is most known for are his Humantash. I can tell by the knowing laugh that many of you have been recipients of the most perfect Humantash known to humanity. You could not make a machine that would be more precise in triangular pastries than Bob Benedon churns out year after year. A ruler, a protractor must have been used to make these absolutely perfect Humantash, which are delicious. And I begin not only because of the perfection of Bob's Humantash, but because I've been called upon to give a Devar Torah. And rather than give a Devar Torah on this week's Parsha or next, I instead want to give a very brief Devar Torah on the entire Torah. The Torah begins with perfection, with our ancient ancestors living in the Garden of Eden, where every need, every care, every concern is addressed by God. There is no struggle, there is no challenge, there is no tough decision to be made. And of course, within a very, very short time, our ancient ancestors leave the Garden of Eden. They can't live with perfection, because Bob's Humantash notwithstanding, there is no such thing as perfection. And so from one place, God gives our people a vision of a new place. From the Garden of Eden, God then, from very early on in the Torah, sets a destination for the Jewish people. And it is the land of Israel. And most of the Torah is then consumed getting to the land of Israel. It's a continual journey. In fact, the Torah ends before the Jewish people even get into the land of Israel. To remind us that that journey and that striving to get to the land of Israel and to make the land of Israel our home is a never-ending journey that will never yield perfection. I suspect that many of you, if you can remember the very first time that you went to Israel, you had an idealized image in your mind of what Israel was. This perfect, beautiful place that was the Jewish homeland. And then you got there, and maybe like me, you were a little bit disillusioned, because in a certain regard, it's a country like any other. But then, after a very short while, the dream came back. And you saw that Israel, although far from perfect, is a place that strives to create not only a homeland for the Jewish people, but the dawn of the Jewish redemption. And the reason why God took us out of the Garden of Eden and gave us the land of Israel is to teach us life's most powerful and potent message, that the things that are most important to us will never be given to us on a silver platter. Because in the process of striving to create something better, not only do we build a better state, we build a better us. By turning ourselves over to this sacred pursuit, it brings out something inside of us that not only makes us proud of the land of Israel, but proud of the work that we do. And nobody that I know is a better living exemplar of that than my friend Bob Benedon. Bob is a better person for the advocacy that he does, for the work that he does on behalf of the community. And he serves as a shining example to all of us of what it can mean to maximize your God-given potential through the service of others. And so many of you get that as well. And we have, in our collective conscience, the state of Israel that represents that exact same ideal. It is not a perfect place. It will always be fraught with challenges. It will always be evolving. It will always be growing. And by supporting the state of Israel, so will we always evolve, always grow, always come that much closer to actualizing our God-given potential. The JCRC keeps that on our agenda. The state of Israel keeps that in our hearts. And I thank you for supporting both.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hillel Zaremba. I'm the Director for Community Relations and New Media at the Israel Consulate in the Mid-Atlantic region. And I just wanted to really come here to extend the greetings of the Israel Consulate to everyone in this room, everyone who came out here this morning, to thank everyone who has put together what looks like to be a most important and thought-provoking event. We at the Consulate truly appreciate what communities like yours do throughout our region, communities that care about Israel, that think deeply about it, and most importantly, act on their beliefs. So, very briefly, special thanks to our panelists and our moderator, to my friend and colleague, Dave Snyder. I don't know where you are, Dave, but thank you for having me. To the generous sponsors of this event, and most of all to the honoree today, Dr. Bob Benedon, everybody has spoken about him already, a tireless friend and promoter of Israel. Yashar.
Good morning. My name is Rick Goldstein. I am a past president of the Jewish Federation of Southern New Jersey, and it's my honor and privilege this morning to present the JCRC Israel Advocacy Award to my dear friend Bob Benedon. If we are fortunate from time to time during the course of our lives, we are given the privilege to know a person who genuinely means what he says, has identified his passions, and is highly motivated to pursue those passions and to set an example for his community. Bob Benedon is one of those rare individuals. If you know Bob, you already know much of what I am about to say, because Bob makes no mistake letting those he knows understand where he stands and what they can be doing to help promote the causes that mean so much to him. If you don't know Bob, you should. He talks the talk and he walks the walk. He does it with grace and pride and in a way that impresses and engages those whom he touches. Bob's commitment to the state of Israel and to the future of the Jewish people started years ago. Bob grew up in West Caldwell, New Jersey, and synagogue life was part of his family's routine. Bob's eye-opening moment was in 1972, when he first traveled to Israel as a member of United Synagogue Youth's pilgrimage program. He spent the summer learning to love his land and his people, and establishing values to which he remains true to this day. This love and passion for Israel has compelled Bob to return to Israel 29 times as of his visit this past week. When Bob met his wife Pam, the love of his life, it was truly a match made in heaven. Pam's commitment and passion to the same high values and causes enabled them to form an incomparable alliance, one embraced with warmth and love. Out of that love came 3 wonderful sons, Mitchell, Evan, and Matthew. Bob and Pam committed to providing all three with Jewish day school educations at Kelman Brown Academy, at Barak Hebrew Academy, and then they each went off to college and pursued their adult lives, establishing and developing the same values and passions as their incredible parents. All three have spent significant amounts of time in Israel. They have studied there and traveled the land on numerous occasions. Like their parents, they have adopted Israeli friends as their family. They feel their pain and celebrate their accomplishments. My wife Lori and our family have had the privilege of traveling to Israel with the Benedon family on a number of occasions, with both Federation missions and for private travel. It is a pleasure to witness the joy, compassion, and respect that each member of the Benedon family has for the state of Israel. As a family, they love the people, the places, and the meaning of Israel. In fact, Evan served in the Israeli Defense Force. There is no higher way to serve the state of Israel and to demonstrate your love for the country. Bob's Israel advocacy has been successful within his home and within his community. Bob's Jewish community credentials are too lengthy to recite completely. In short, he has been a member of the Federation Board of Directors for many years. Bob has been an outspoken board member, always supporting increased funding allocations for the needs of Israel, and pleading for Federation to enhance its commitment to programming and fundraising to support Israel and overseas needs. He has served in a variety of leadership positions within Federation's annual campaign. He is a member of the JCRC Israel Advocacy Initiative Committee, which Pam, his wife, chairs. He serves as the Federation on the Federation Israel and Overseas Committee and on Federation's Funds Development Board. Bob is a member of the Kelman Brown Academy Executive Committee and School Board and served as president of the school board for 3 years. Bob is a strong supporter of AIPAC. Every year, he and Pam attend the AIPAC Policy Conference and other AIPAC events throughout the year. He recruits new participants and supports a strong U.S.-Israel alliance. Bob has led numerous Federation missions to Washington and has been a leading advocate to maintain that program, as he keenly understands the need for political action to encourage and strengthen the U.S.-Israel partnership. Bob's Jewish National Fund resume is extensive. He is a member and past president of the South Jersey Board. He has served as local and national major gifts chairman. He is a member of the National Board of Directors and the National Budget and Finance Committee, and he is the chair of the National Makor Leadership Development Program, with whom he has participated in 7 group leadership missions to Israel. We all wonder when Bob finds the time to work at his periodontics practice and to teach at Penn Dental School, but he does that too. The JCRC Israel Advocacy Award is presented annually to an individual, business, or civic organization who, through their words, actions, and deeds, contribute to the South Jersey community having a better understanding of, appreciation for, and connection to the State of Israel. There can be no person deserving of this highest recognition more than my dear friend Bob Benedon. Bob, your spirit, your words, your actions, and your soul all shine with your love, admiration, and commitment to the State of Israel. You tirelessly advocate for Israel, both privately and publicly. You speak to any group that will allow you through their door. And that's the truth. And you educate others on the merits of why Israel advocacy is essential to the future of our people and our land, and why it is so important to all of us as citizens of the United States. You truly inspired the South Jersey community to meet the challenge and to protect and defend Israel and its people whenever and wherever that protection and defense is needed. And you do it with total commitment and humility. Your presence and active participation as an Israel advocate enriches our community and drives all of us to make Israel advocacy a priority of our lives. We love you and we thank you for what you do and how you do it, and hope that you will continue your leadership role for many years to come. Your life brings so much meaning to all of ours. Bob, so many of today's participants in this huge attendance are here to support and honor you for receiving this award. Yet there are many who were unable to join us today, several of whom expressed their congratulations if we will all turn to the screen.
Hi, Bob, Mr. Smith from Community Relations, and I think the big myself over congratulations.
Johan Kelly, the mayor of the Valley of Spring Region Council. Bob, thank you very much. Congratulations for everything you have done for us.
Hi, this is Lisa Wagner. I want to wish you myself on your honor, and congratulations.
It's the big Mitchell from the Alexander Butts High School in Israel. I just heard about the honor you're getting, and I just want to say, Mazal Tov and Kol Hakol.
My name is Lynn Norton Robbins, and as Regional Director for Jewish National Fund, I have worked alongside Bob Benedon, successfully building a more visible presence for JNF. Tonight, you honor a master. Bob, I'm in the only other place you might rather be, other than where you are right now. I'm in Israel. Otherwise, I would be with all of you, paying tribute to one of Israel's greatest advocates. On behalf of Jewish National Fund, I thank you for your devoted passion and tireless leadership. It is both an honor and a privilege to personally partner with you and the leadership you helped to build. Mazel tov on receiving this well-deserved award and setting the stage for greater things.
Hi, Bob. Russell Robinson here. I want to congratulate you on the JCRC Israel Advocacy Award. There is no greater advocate for the land and the people of Israel than Bob Benedon. From all of your family here at Jewish National Fund, congratulations.
Congratulations, Bob, on this well-deserved honor. As a past JCRC president and last year's recipient of the Israel Advocacy Award, I can think of nobody more deserving than you. Your passion for Israel, your dedication to the state and to education about the state is unparalleled. Mazel tov.
I'd like to read the presentation being made to Bob, Israel Advocacy Award presented to Robert Benedon in recognition of your tireless efforts to educate, promote, and raise funds on behalf of Israel through your leadership roles in the Jewish National Fund, Jewish Federation of Southern New Jersey, and JCRC's Israel Advocacy Initiative Committee, February 23rd, 2014. Bob.
I think I really ought to just sit down now. It's an expression quick while you're ahead. And there's a joke that goes with that, but I don't want to tell it. Okay. Boker Tov, Chaverim, friends. Thank you for this wonderful honor. What could be better than to be recognized for doing what you're passionate about? And how appropriate the timing is, as I just got off a plane from Israel on Friday, and in a few days I head down to Washington, D.C. for the APAC Policy Conference. I can't tell you how excited I am that Federation is backing the Israel mission business, and that next month there's a group of 60 or 70 people going to Israel. That warms my heart. I am also very pleased that a number of you will be joining me at the APAC Policy Conference next week. Rabbi Kravnik, what can I say? Thank you for embarrassing me with my commentation. It's one of my prides of passions and prides that I do them perfectly. Thank you for embarrassing me. Rick, what can I say? I am honored and humbled. Where do you say? There you are. I'm honored and humbled by your introduction. Next to Pam, you're probably the single person in the community with whom I share this passion so greatly. We have traveled together to Israel, as you said, many times to our beloved homeland, and when we go separately, we often call or send emails or pictures so that we can each get each other through it till our next fix. Thank you to my wife, Pam, who chairs the JCRC Israel Advocacy Initiative, and who is equally passionate as me when it comes to Israel. And to Mitch, Evan, and Matt, and all their support and encouragement through the years with all this work that I do in this ongoing project of the Benedon family. Thank you, Al Abrisi, for thinking big and sharing this wonderful event. My heartfelt thanks to David Snyder for his energy and passion and leadership of JCRC. I really appreciate the fact that you've taken this Israel initiative thing so far in the last couple of years. It's not surprising considering your background in both JNF and APAC, so thank you. So why am I an Israel advocate? So should I speak about an ancient people longing for 2,000 years to return to a biblical homeland? Should I speak about an unlikely hero, Theodore Herzl, who as a journalist covering the Dreyfus trial became the driving force in modern Zionism? Should I speak about the fund he started, Keret Yemen Israel, the Jewish National Fund, to purchase land which would become the modern state of Israel? Should I speak about how Israel makes the world a better place, specifically about cutting-edge technologies in the fields of medicine, agriculture, water management, computer science, cell phone applications, security, military intelligence, missile defense, the list goes on and on. Should I speak about a startup nation that has more companies on the NASDAQ than any other country except the United States? Should I speak about Israeli Nobel Prize winners? Should I speak about a country that somehow manages to be the first on the scene when disaster strikes, saving lives, delivering babies, and donating millions of dollars worth of state-of-the-art medical equipment when the acute episode is over? And most recently, but not often reported, should I speak about Israel at war with Syria, that has treated over 700 Syrian patients in a secret field hospital in the Golan Heights, transferring those with grave wounds to hospitals in Sfat and Haifa? I could go on for hours, and many of you have heard me speak on these topics. So how does one become an Israel advocate? You get on a plane at 17 years of age with 65 of your peers, and you spend 7 weeks hiking and touring our homeland. Yes, that Israel pilgrimage peer trip in 1972 changed my life. It was my first of 29, thank you for counting, Rick, trips, and I fell in love with a country, a concept, and a people. This tiny country of 600,000 people in 1948 managed not to just survive a war, but to emerge as promised, a Jewish homeland with a central theme of protecting our people. Following the War of Independence, Jews were expelled from neighboring Arab lands. This tiny country with no resources, homes, water, or infrastructure took in more than 600,000 of the 750,000 Jewish refugees, because that's what we do. We take care of our brothers. This pattern has been repeated throughout 65 years of existence, giving refuge to Ethiopians, Russians, and more recently the French. Israel is truly a vibrant democracy, a free society with Jews and Arabs in government, the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, the military, and any and all professions. It is a country that can boast about women's rights, religious freedom, gay rights, and free speech. Where else could an Arab MK heckle a foreign leader, as was recently done when Prime Minister Harper spoke before the Knesset? So how do I describe my connection with Israel? Is it just a place where I'm at home in a majority, where the people will give you the shirt off their back if they know you? Is it central to 14 million Jews in the world where 6 million are living at home? A short story to tell you yet another reason why I'm enamored with this beautiful place. This past August, Pam and I went to Israel to the wedding of Ayal Engel. Ayal came to the States with a basketball team from a magnet school in Herzliya to play basketball at federations around the country. Many of you housed these players. After a week with us, we began communicating with his family and visited, and they became our dear friends and part of our extended family. The wedding was wonderful, but it leads to this story. 5 glorious days in a beautiful beachfront hotel in Tel Aviv, and each morning after breakfast, Pam and I would get up and take a walk. One morning we headed north. We came to the area where the Tayel and Malaby Street intersect. Many of you will know that spot. At that point, I remembered on one of our Federation missions that Rick and I had shared, going to the Yalek house nearby. We asked directions, we were aimed uphill, and we began walking. When it appeared we were really not sure where we were going, we saw 2 young people approaching us. Pam asked in Hebrew to the young man, where is the Yalek Street? Ben, who heard her accent, replied in English, because he was from South Africa, and he introduced us to his girlfriend, Joy, who was from France. conversation ensued, and they walked us to Yalek Street. They had both made Aliyah and were in the legal corps of the army. I turned to Pam and I said, I wonder if they know Ishar. Before I could say the last name, they both said, Yitzhaki. So, 6 million Jews in Israel, and we meet 2 young Jews who made Aliyah and served in the army together with the son of my only cousin in Israel. There are no degrees of separation, and Pam and I have many stories equally as amazing. So you can see from all I have said why I love Israel, why this is where I have chosen to devote my time and resources, and why I thrive with those who share this passion. The future of Israel rests heavily in the hands of our children and youth. Support the Israel Advocacy Initiative that helps educate our kids. Support Jewish and Israel education both at synagogue and day schools. Support youth programs that connect this generation to Israel. Support intensive Jewish education at Calvin Brown Academy and Polis Foundation School. As we know, this encourages our future leaders. Encourage trips to Israel through confirmation classes, Calvin Brown Academy, Polis Foundation School, USY, BBYO, Alternative Spring Break with JNF, and many more. Who knows? 42 years from now, a kid who went on one of these trips might just be standing right here, helping our beloved homeland. I will close by saying, Israel Advocacy is not a spectator sport. You need to be in the game. Please join me. Come to APAC. I can get you a deal. Ask me to help you plan a trip to Israel for you or your family. Encourage your children and grandchildren to go to Israel. It will change their lives for the better. Thank you again for this wonderful honor. I can promise I'm not done yet.
And I'm here representing dozens, if not hundreds of teens in our community who simply want to say thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you who have already made a gifted honor of Bob Benedon, and in turn are providing the Jewish Community Relations Council with the funds that they need to continue providing us, the next generation of pro-Israel advocates, the education, tools, and resources we need to stand up and speak out in support of Israel now, and as importantly, when we head off to college. I am privileged to be one of 50 Stand With Us MC interns from around the country, being mentored and trained on how to be a better spokesperson for the state of Israel moving forward. Beginning with next month, JCRC will once again be partnering with Stand With Us and putting on a 3-part Israel advocacy training program for teens. A flyer for the series is on your table this morning, and I urge all of you in this room who either have someone of a high school age child or someone who you know who's a high school age child to please encourage them to register and attend. There's no cost to attend any of these sessions, and again, that is thanks to all of you sitting in this room this morning. But we can do more. JCRC's Israel Advocacy Initiative Committee has numerous projects and programs that can be implemented if not for having their limited resources. Please, if you have not done so already, I would like to encourage you to fill out the green contribution form that can be found on your tables and turn it into someone wearing one of the very cool name tags before leaving here this morning. I too would like to congratulate Bob Benedon on his award, and thank you to all of you for your financial support.
My name is Jonathan Korn, president of the JCRC. Maddie, you certainly are a tough act to follow. All of us at JCRC are very proud of you and are thrilled to be able to partner with you and assist you in your efforts to engage your peers in the important work of Israel advocacy. Although I know you will continue your pro-Israel activities once you arrive at Tulane in the fall, we hope you can stay in touch with JCRC in the years ahead. Now it's on to my official duties. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Eric Mandel. Dr. Mandel is director of the Middle East Political and Information Network, a private analysis service read by members of Congress, the Knesset, journalists, and organizational leaders. He regularly briefs members of Congress and their foreign policy aides in the Middle East and Israel. Dr. Mandel recently returned from a fact-finding trip in the Middle East, meeting with the defense minister, Bughi Yaron, and Israel's top security ministers, Palestinian Authority, Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Jordanian opposition, leading journalists, as well as visiting Syrian refugee camps in Jordan. Seems like quite a busy trip that you had. Some of his recently published articles are Israel in the Public Eye, Young American Jews in Israel, Consequences to Palestinian Unilateral Actions, and most recently, What Occupation Means Depends on Who is Speaking. He is also the Northeast co-chair of Stand With Us, an educational organization fighting BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. It is now my pleasure to turn over this morning's program to Dr. Mandel.
I'm just going to take about 2 minutes to sort of frame what we'll do this morning before we introduce our two illustrious speakers and hopefully have a wonderful discussion. The concurrent Iranian and Israeli-Palestinian negotiations divided the American people and the American Jewish community. On Iran, President Obama said, quote, "Diplomacy opened up a new path toward a world that is more secure, a future in which we can verify that Iran's nuclear program is peaceful and that it cannot build a nuclear weapon." Critics have pointed out that the goal of sanctions was not to bring Iran to the table, but to halt and suspend enrichment, as every UN resolution in the past decade had demanded. Worse, they said, the interim agreement appears to have conceded Iran's right to enrich and has irreparably weakened the sanctions regime. As leading critic Senator Mark Kirk said, quote, "At the end of the process, will Iran's supreme leader be able to wake up one day, kick out inspectors, and race to the bomb?" We'll move on next to talking about the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. On the Israeli-Palestinian front, critics of Israel say that the source of the conflict is Israel's illegal occupation of Palestinian territory and continued settlement building. They see Israel as the intransient party, and that if Israel is pressured into a resolution of the conflict, it would be the Gordian knot to untie for regional peace. Supporters of the current Israeli policy counter that the source of the conflict is the Arabs' refusal to recognize Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people. Moreover, they say, the land is disputed, not occupied, according to international law, and Israel has been willing to return some or all of the land, but has been turned away because the real desire of the Arab people and the Palestinian Arabs is for all of the land of Israel. They cite comments by President Abbas, who has said innumerable times that he won't, quote, accept the Jewish state or the Jewishness of the state, and on his insistence of a right of return for the descendants of Palestinian refugees, which would be the demographic destruction of Israel. Finally, I can tell you firsthand after meeting with Israeli leadership that what they're really concerned about is the growing threat of the BDS movement, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. So what we're going to do this morning is I'm going to hand this over to JJ and Jonathan. Each will speak for hopefully about 5 minutes, and then we'll get into a discussion. So JJ, I think you're up first. And can somebody introduce JJ? You. Am I introducing JJ? Actually, I don't have the bio of JJ.
You don't have my bio.
I don't have your bio. Oh. JJ's going to come forward.
I don't think I have...
You want to introduce yourself? Or?
Very briefly, I am the editor-at-large of The Forward, which in magazine terms usually means that you used to be the editor and now you get to write whatever you want. I was the editor from 2000 to 2007. Before that, I worked for New York Jewish Week. I worked for the Jerusalem Report. I worked for I was a Metro reporter for a Hebrew language startup weekly in Los Angeles for the Yordim. I lived in Israel for most of the 1970s. I was the secretary of People Together. I was an education specialist at the World Zionist Organization. I was a sniper with the Border Police Civil Guard. And I drove a cab in New York City for a while. And I guess Pardon?
You use the sniper when
I didn't have an occasion to use my sniper skills in taxi cab driving, although I was prepared.
I don't have Jonathan's either. Jonathan.
Well, good morning. As long as we're introducing ourselves. I know many of you know me as I know you, because before I came to Commentary Magazine, I'm currently senior online editor and chief political blogger at commentarymagazine.com. Before that, I spent 10 years as your neighbor and as the editor of the Jewish Exponent in Philadelphia. We have many readers and we have many friends. And it's a pleasure to come here this morning to see so many of them. Before that, I edited Connecticut Jewish Ledger, contributing editor of Miami Jewish Tribune. Long journalistic career, and right now I'm at Commentary, and I edit its online version, and write most days about both politics and Israel and the Middle East.
So I think Jonathan, JJ will be up first. What we're going to have is each one speak for about 5 minutes, and there we go. And after that, we'll get into the discussion, and then at the very end, we'll have a Q&A, and at that point, we'll give sort of rules for that so we can respect each other and get out as many questions as possible. So, JJ?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but having covered the politics of the American Jewish community for the last 20 years, South Jersey is rather renowned around the country as a source of enormous support for the State of Israel, the government of Israel, for AIPAC, for pro-Israel candidates. You guys are the best. And now, give me 5 minutes to make your life a little bit more complicated. Start with Iran. In June 2010, Prime Minister Netanyahu, 1 year on the job, asked his security cabinet to authorize a military strike against Iran's nuclear installations. The cabinet did what it normally does in standard in those occasions, which is to bring in the heads of the security services, the Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff, the director of the Mossad, and the director of the Shin Bet. And they unanimously, strongly opposed a military strike against Iran. I'll tell you why in just a moment. But first I want to talk about the consequences. So that was in June. Starting in August, Bibi began the process of dumping all three of them. And between January and June of 2011, the three heads of the three services were replaced by newcomers who were supposed to be more compliant with the government. In August, he fired his director of the National Security Council, Uzi Arad, who had been his chief political and diplomatic advisor going back to 1997, in and out of office. Uzi is, well, let me put it like this. The left likes to call him Israel's own Dr. Strangelove. He had worked as chief director of research at the Mossad for many years before going to work for Bibi in 97. He got fired in August, and the result was that a whole new crew came in. In December of 2011, the new the new director of the Mossad, Tamir Pardo, did what none of the others had ever done before, which was to say publicly, Iran is not an existential threat to Israel. That was the director of the Mossad in December of 2011, speaking to the annual convention of Israeli ambassadors from around the world. He said going around calling Iran an existential problem for Israel, an existential threat, is bad for Israel. In April of 2012 now, the new chief of staff of the Israeli military, Benny Gantz, again did what nobody had done before. He gave a newspaper interview. He said the leadership of Iran is rational in its own way. They have cost and benefit analyses for what's good for Iran, and they have not yet decided whether or not to build a bomb. That was in keeping with American intelligence also. Now, why were they all united against, and by the way, they were speaking for their staff, the senior leadership of all three services is agreed on this. Uzi Arad, who he and I go way back, and he explained it to me over the phone about a year ago. He said, look, if you go in and bomb Iran's military installations, first of all, you'd better make sure you get them all. Because otherwise you're going to be in the situation Israel was in after it bombed Iraq's military installation in 1981. Iraq went ahead and accelerated its nuclear program because it felt now greater justification for having a nuclear program to protect itself. And the West, when it went into Iraq in 1991, was shocked at the extent to which Saddam Hussein had advanced in a nuclear program. That's one of the reasons that 12 years later, the Bush administration was convinced there must be a nuclear program in Iraq, because there had been one, very advanced, in 1991, which, according to all of the Western intelligence agencies, was a consequence of Israel's bombing in 1981 with no next day plan, no follow-up plan. Now, Uzi explained very carefully, if you're going to bomb, you need the American military bombing because they've got the capacity to get there and get back and bust all of the installations to the ground and then stay there for a long time with intrusive inspections of the sort that Iraq had after 1991 to make sure they don't rebuild. And to do that, you need the international community. I'm going to quote him. You need the Europeans, you need the Arabs. You have to get them on your side. Otherwise, you cannot maintain an on-the-ground inspection. The logic of that is to do what President Obama did, which was the first act after coming into office in 2009. He joined the five-nation negotiations, which President Bush had not participated in. The Bush administration's position was, we are not going to participate in direct talks with Iran until they honor the UN resolutions, which I won't talk to you until you give me everything I want of it. Obama went in to the talks, which have since been the P5+6, and a year later, the P5+1. A year later, now remember, America had been imposing sanctions on Iran since 1996. Al D'Amato had sponsored the Iran-Libya Sanctions Act. And they had been steadily tightening since 96, and Iran was merrily moving along toward a nuclear bomb. And it moved on all the way through the Bush administration, getting closer and closer to a nuclear bomb. And all of the talks, all of the UN resolutions, none of them did anything. Obama then went in and got crippling sanctions. Once he'd reestablished America's credibility with the Europeans and the Arabs, the sanctions were jacked up beginning in June of 2010 by the EU and by the Security Council to a level they had never reached before. Now, Congress had come in January of 2010 with another unilateral sanctions plan. The Obama administration fought that. They said, we've seen for a decade and a half how unilateral sanctions by the United States work. Everybody else trades with Iran. We need the whole world sanctioning Iran in order to do that. Leading means leading and people following you. To shout out loud and get out in front and nobody follows you, that's not leadership. And so the EU and the Security Council imposed the crippling sanctions in June and July of 2010 that resulted in Iran coming back in 2013, I guess, and saying, all right, our economy is dying. We will agree to enter talks and freeze most of our enrichment. We will freeze. Now, what Iran has done, they have stopped enrichment to 20%. They have downgraded the 20% uranium to 3.5%, not all of it, but they're moving. The agreement is that they will downgrade half of what they have. It's an agreement that's as far, maybe they could have gotten a better agreement, but they got the agreement they could get. Now, the reaction of the Israeli military and intelligence community, when you take Uzi Arad, who's what you might call the right wing of the intelligence community, saying the Obama administration is doing a pretty good job. And the deal they got in November is a pretty good deal. It opens up the way to talks during which Iran stops proceeding toward the bomb. That has not happened before. All of the talks before, Iran was proceeding. Iran was enriching and building new centrifuges and expanding its capacity while talking. Once the crippling sanctions had been introduced, with the Chinese and the Russians and the Arab countries on board, Iran had no choice but to agree to talks with a standstill and a slight rollback. Should I go on with the Palestinians, or should I?
Why don't you take a minute to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, and then we'll go to Jonathan, because I'm sure he agrees with everything you said. He'll just...
Oh, yeah, already gone 10 minutes. The Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. I don't know if you saw the movie, The Gatekeepers. The Gatekeepers. It was nominated for an Oscar last year. In it, the 6 former heads of the Shin Bet talk about the mismanagement of the, what they call the occupation of the West Bank. And why is the West Bank called occupied? Because it is controlled by the Israeli military. It is not part of the state of Israel. It is territory that Israel captured in 1967 and has been holding pending a negotiated settlement. Now, whether or not it's occupied under the terms of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which is a complicated issue I won't talk about right now, Israel, reading the plain language of the Fourth Geneva Convention, says it's not occupied according to this treaty. The language seems to say that. No other country in the world accepts Israel's reading of that language. No other country. Leaving that aside, Israel has been, since 1967, trying to get the Arab states, and since the 1980s, the Palestinians, to accept Israel's presence. In September of 1988, the Palestine National Council, the PLO's executive body, met in Algiers and accepted the UN partition 40 years later, which divided historic Palestine, the land of Israel, into a Jewish and Arab state. Read Resolution 181 of the UN from 1947. A Jewish and Arab state. When you accept Resolution 181, you have recognized a Jewish state. That's what they did in 1988. In 1993, they began direct negotiations with Israel, and they have been negotiating since 1993. Israel has made several offers, one in 2000, one in 2008. Both prime ministers who made those offers then lost their jobs. Ehud Olmert wrote in a memoir last year that one of the frustrating things about negotiating with the Palestinians is that they would take forever to come back. You'd make an offer, they'd come back 3 months later with a counteroffer. Your counteroffer, we'd be back the next day with our counteroffer, and they'd be back 3 months later with their counteroffer. It takes forever on their side. They've got to run it past everybody. And so, no, they did not accept Israel's offer in 2008, and Olmert lost his job. Bibi came in 2009, my last point, and he laid down new conditions. Well, first he said, I want to negotiate with no preconditions, meaning from zero, meaning we don't pick up where Olmert left off because I don't accept his position. And then they finally entered negotiations, and Bibi laid down some new. Recognize us, quote, as a Jewish state, which no other country in the world has done, and Israeli control of the Jordan River. Now, beginning with his laydown of those conditions, it was the June 2010 request to bomb Iran, and during the 2010-2011 negotiations, these new conditions, moving the goalposts, the recognized as a Jewish state and the Jordan River, that the military and intelligence community began to get nervous because they thought Israel has a deal in sight that will get us what we wanted for 60 years. Peace agreements with 22 Arab states, possibly, with 57 Muslim states, embassies in Tel Aviv, and the end of the conflict. It won't be the end of the conflict. We may have to go in the way we've gone into Lebanon and Gaza periodically and bomb them to remind them, leave us alone. And it's worked. The northern border's been quiet for 6 years. The southern border's been quiet for a year and a half since Israel bombed the heck out of them in Operation
Cast Lead.
Well, Cast Lead worked for a few months.
Pillar of Defense.
It didn't go hard enough. In Pillar of Defense, they went in harder. And since then, Hamas has been trying to tamp down bombing a rocket fire by the jihadists that have moved in. So that's basically Israel. The military, now I'm not telling you don't advocate what the prime minister is demanding. I'm trying to tell you that the opposite argument is not, oh, the poor Palestinians, they've suffered enough. The opposite argument is not Israel is an illegal settler state. The opposite argument is, I'll quote now, finally, I'll close with this, Dan Chalutz, who was the chief of staff before Ashkenazi. He was the very controversial, again, considered a right-wing nut when Sharon hired him. In 2010, he joined Kadima, held a press conference. They said, what should Israel's borders be? He said, any border that the politicians decide on is a border the IDF can defend. Any border the politicians, which interpretation, A, give us a border because we know how to defend ourselves against borders. Stop this ridiculous situation where we have a country that includes 3 million people who hate us. Second, there's no such thing as an indefensible border. There are better and worse borders. There are better deals to be had and worse deals to be had. Get us a deal and we can do our job.
Jonathan, I've watched your face get redder and redder as this went on. So I'll leave the Winograd Commission and Halutz to the end for you, but I want to give you equal time.
That equal time, I don't know. Mike's not on. 11.
There you go.
Pretty long 5 minutes. So. But it's not your fault. You didn't stop me, so I don't know if I'll go on as long. I'll kind of start where JJ started, and there are actually many points of agreement between the two of us, which I'll get to at the end of my 5 minutes, going on 15. But the fact is, I'm certainly not here to debate the point that it would be a good idea for Israel to attack Iran on its own. I don't know really anybody in Israel, the right or left, who thinks that's a good idea. And indeed, a lot of the debate in Israel, since we're going to start with Iran, has been about the notion of the Americans need to do it. We have to coordinate with the Americans. And so, that's not really the point of contention, certainly not the point of contention between me and my friend JJ, or one that I think we need to spend much time debating ourselves as a group. What we have to understand, what I would prefer to do is to try to answer the question that is sort of the title of this program, can international engagement stop Iran's nuclear program? And my answer to that on one foot is sure, if the purpose of that engagement is to stop Iran's nuclear program. If the purpose of engagement is actually to make sure that Iran never gets a bomb, Iran doesn't have the capability to do that, then that is exactly the right path to choose. And indeed, that is what President Obama has said all along. His rhetoric on this issue has always been very good, since before he became president. That's exactly the objective, because war would be a disaster for Israel. Certainly war on its own, war, even if it's just airstrikes, would be a disaster for the United States. A lot of messy complications. But the problem lurking always at the back of that question, and lately we've, as if you followed the debate about whether additional sanctions should be put on Iran by the United States, it has been, that debate has been captured. Do you want war or do you want diplomacy? And obviously war is a bad idea. But there's only one thing that I can think of that might be worse than war, and that would be Iran getting a nuclear weapon. And that has pretty much been a consensus position in Israel. And frankly, it's a consensus position within the United States. The question is, how do we go about it? The problem with what has happened in the last 5 years, and JJ's right, the Bush administration didn't do a great job on Iran. Those of you who followed my columns when I was in the Exponent and writing for the Jerusalem Post during the Bush administration know that I wasn't too thrilled with what they did. They basically, JJ framed it as they didn't want to talk directly. The Bush administration framed it, well, we're farming this out to the Europeans. They're the ones who know the Iranians, they're the ones who have decent relations with them. Let's see if they can do it. And what we've seen in that period and since then has been a pattern of Iranian negotiations where the Iranians have, like a basketball team with the lead, they've been trying to run out the clock, and they've done a very good job at it. They have played a whole generation of Western negotiators for fools, going back and forth. Yes, we'll agree to this. No, yes, no, yes, and the time keeps dragging. And that's where we are now. The greatest fear now is not, I don't trust President Obama, not whether you trust President Obama, maybe some of you do, some of you don't, whether to keep his word. The question is whether this process of international engagement, number one, is focused on the right end goal. And number two, whether the Iranians are serious about it. We have good reason to doubt that, something that even the president has acknowledged, because they have a record of not being serious about it. We also have a record of what happens sometimes in nuclear negotiations, where credulous Western diplomats get played for fool by dictators. Indeed, one of the more ominous little coincidences is that the person who is sort of our point diplomatic person right now with Iran in the P5+1 talks, Wendy Sherman was also the Clinton administration's point person in the nuclear talks with North Korea. And we all know how that happened. What we have to do is have a serious program. Yes, sanctions. The Obama administration has said, no, we can't have any more sanctions than the Europeans want. But the fact is, the only thing that will stop the Iranians from getting to their goal is the kind of really tough sanctions that will stop them from trading oil, that will strangle their economy. We were on our way to that last year. We're getting stronger with some of the tough sanctions that the president didn't want imposed, in which your senator, Robert Benedon, had a terrible conflict with the administration because they first tried to water down his proposal in 2010 and then opposed it after he watered it down. What happened last November was that the West went into talks with Iran and said, listen, we want you to stop enrichment as we've always asked you to do. We need you to make real progress towards that. And the Iranians said no. And because the Iranians said no, the United States granted them what they've been saying all along, the right to enrich. Tacitly, the November agreement gave them what they've said all along. Has this agreement frozen their nuclear program? Not at all. The centrifuges are still turning. Yes, they've said they won't refine above 20%, but that's not the real issue. The low-grade uranium they're enriching now can be converted to weapons-grade fuel within a few weeks in a nuclear breakout. Perhaps this agreement has lengthened that breakout time. Perhaps not much. But by going in there, signing this, they have told the Iranians, you're going to be able to keep your nuclear program. We're going to try to keep some wraps on it, but you're going to keep your nuclear, you're not going to have to dismantle your plants. You're not going to have to dismantle the centrifuges. And that agreement didn't even talk about inspection of Parton, where they're doing their military research. Didn't mention ballistic technology, which reminds us that Iran is a threat to the entire West and not just Israel. That's where we are now. And so the question is, and it's an open question, is this administration interested more in engagement for its own sake, engagement on a way to a détente with Iran, as part of a general policy of American retreat from the Middle East, where we are letting them win, where we pretty much said they and the Russians get to decide things in Syria, where we make no demands on them to stop funding international terrorism with their allies in Hezbollah. That's the question. Is this engagement actually getting us where we need to go or not? And quite frankly, what was interesting about the debate we recently had about more sanctions was because that sanctions bill, again supported by your Senator Robert Menendez, would have only gone into effect if the current round of negotiations failed. Therefore, strengthening the president's position, saying, listen, if you try to string us along again, we're going to impose tougher sanctions, and they're already on the books. We're not going to have to wait a few months for the Senate to get back in session to figure it out and to have the House version decided.
Just a couple of moments about Israel-Palestinian.
But let me just finish that point. The point is, this administration has already said, and in the first article, the first talks, in the reconvening, the next round, we're talking not just about 6 months, we're talking about a year. Again, the Iranians are running out the clock. Now, as far as the negotiations with the Palestinians, the position of Israel is one that isn't much different than it has been in the last generation. For 20 years, Israel has been involved in various peace negotiations. And we can always put it on them. We can always look at it sort of myopically, what Israel is doing and what Israel isn't doing. But the problem with most of those discussions is that it doesn't discuss what the Palestinians are doing and saying, and where the culture of Palestinian politics has been. Are we in sight of an agreement with the Palestinians? I don't know too many serious people in Israel who think Mahmoud Abbas has the political power, even if he had the political will, to make such an agreement stick. Not on the refugee issue, not even on the Jewish state issue, which is important because it signifies an end to the conflict. It signifies that Palestinian nationalism is going to focus on building a Palestinian state and not on just extinguishing Zionism, which has been its raison d'etre since its beginnings. That's the issue. With Hamas still in control of Gaza, with Hamas fighting off groups to the right of it, the idea that Abbas is going to do this, he's going to sort of cut the Gordian knot, it beggars the imagination. And what we're seeing now, between both Netanyahu and Abbas, is this game of chicken. Because they know that there isn't going to be an agreement. They know that the Palestinians aren't going to be able to say yes, just as they weren't able to say yes in 2000 and 2001 when Ehud Barak offered them a state in almost all of the West Bank, Gaza, and a share of Jerusalem. In 2008, when Ehud Olmert offered an even better offer, and Abbas didn't so much say no as he fled the negotiations, is to avoid having to say no and therefore get the blame. To spend our time chasing our tail, and to be focusing, as to all too many Americans, all too many people who even say that they care about Israel, focusing on pressuring Israel and to trying to either overturn the verdict of Israeli democracy or to save it from itself, just ignores the realities on the ground about what a Palestinian culture of hate and incitement has created. And that is a situation where we are still nowhere close to that peace that all Israelis want. And that's why the most important thing we can be doing as American Jews is not to be doing what, frankly, JJ and I have done a lot of the last 20 years and more, which is debating left, right, the old familiar refrain about where Israel's borders, settlement's good, settlement's bad, settlement's good here, settlement's not good there. It's to focus on what the real enemy is. And the enemy is a BDS movement, the movement to boycott Israel, the movement which seeks to, as much of the mainstream of Palestinian political culture seeks, to destroy the Jewish state, which isn't willing to recognize the legitimacy of Jewish sovereignty over any part of the country, no matter where the borders are drawn. If you take your eye off that ball, then you're doing us a disservice. And as much as I applaud all of your efforts here, and I thank you again for inviting us, that's where we have to focus so much of our efforts. It's not on fighting each other in the old left-right debates. It's about fighting a BDS movement which has made great bounds in Europe and which has reached a beachhead on our campuses and looking elsewhere, including in mainstream liberal Protestant denominations. That's where we have to fight, and that's where we have to focus.
So I want to get into a little more depth here, and we will get back to BDS. So the first question I want to ask is, do you believe that the President's decision to allow Iranian enrichment in the final deal is because he believes, like Kenneth Pollock of the Brookings Institute, that we can live with Iran like we lived in containment with the Russians during the Cold War? And he also said that if anyone believes that any enrichment is possible, that they can get a nuclear weapons if they choose. He didn't have a problem with that because he believed we can live in containment. So do you think the President follows that line of logic? You want to start, Jonathan?
Well, he says he doesn't. He went to APAC in 2012 and went beyond his past positions about stopping Iran and said, he specifically says, he will not contemplate containing Iran. Now that's exactly, that's the right position as far as I'm concerned. It's the right position as far as the pro-Israel community and indeed those who care about Western defense think. The problem is he going about it the right way? Are we heading, as I said, is this engagement that we've been involved in? He's been trying to engage with Iran since he came into office, even more or less said in his first speeches as president. I don't know. I mean, it will only work if the Iranians believe that the Americans mean business. Right now, the only person I know who thinks that if these negotiations blow up, or if they drag out so long that it's obvious the Iranians have no intention of dismantling their nuclear program or stopping it, that then the United States, under President Obama, will attack Iran. The only person I know who thinks that is the other Goldberg, Jeffrey Goldberg, who writes for Bloomberg.
He wrote that yesterday.
Not my friend Goldberg, but the other guy.
Iceberg, Bloomberg.
Yeah, right. And, that's been his position. I don't think that's credible. I think this administration is so, believes so deeply in diplomacy, not as a tool, but as an end in itself. Now, this goes to the question, can Iran, I'll stop for a moment and try to say, can Iran, is Pollock right? Can Iran be contained? Well, we won't know until we get there, to be honest, but I can think of few things that would be more dangerous for the United States or Israel to try and see if that's true. Because even if you don't think that the religious fanatics that run that country and that have threatened Israel with genocide in the past, even if you think they don't mean business, and it's arguable that, they wouldn't risk their regime, even though sometimes they've hinted at it, with a nuclear war with Israel. Imagine in Iran empowered with being able to project a nuclear umbrella over Hezbollah in Lebanon, or Assad in Syria, or if they go back to being allies with Hamas, because most of Hamas's munitions during the Second Intifada were imported from Iran. They broke over the Syria question. That's getting a little into the weeds. Imagine what that will mean. I can tell you who's really scared of that, and it's not just the Israelis, it's the Saudis. It's the entire Arab world, which knows they have a great deal to fear from a nuclear Iran. And that would completely overturn the balance of power in the region. I don't think we should try to contain Iran. I think we have to stop Iran. And the question is this administration serious enough about this? Is it willing to push on sanctions? Is it willing to not take no for an answer as it did last November? And that is an open question. It's one we have a lot of reason to work.
JJ, can you answer, one, can we live with enrichment? And do you believe that the administration would rather sign a bad deal with Iran than be put in the position of choosing either nothing or a military strike?
I'm not a mind reader. The people that I know well, here's how it's been explained to me. America had to get into the game, which means sit down, to show its good faith to the Russians and the French and the Chinese in order to get them to go along with the serious crippling sanctions that would make Iran say, okay, no more enrichment to 20%, no more new centrifuges, beginning to back down from the race toward the bomb that they had been involved in all through the Clinton and Bush years. The next stage is to see whether or not they will. Containment means accepting that they have a bomb and trying to prevent them from using it. That's what we did with the Russians. The goal here is to prevent them from getting a bomb. If you can do it without troops on the ground, that means through an agreement. An agreement, by definition, means I get what I want and you get some of what you want. So, leaving them some enrichment capacity under strict controls has to be part of an agreement. So the test of a good agreement isn't whether they have any centrifuges left and any enrichment left, it's whether they are far enough away from bomb-making capacity that the West will know soon enough that it can take action. If you can't get that agreement, at that point, the point of these negotiations was to show the Russians and the Chinese and the Saudis and everybody else, yes, you can't get there without an attack. And then we go back to Uzi Arad's model, which is an attack in which the entire world is involved in the intrusive inspections, in the prevention, in on the ground. It's basically an occupation of Iran. America tried unilateral occupation once before. It was a disaster. It was such a disaster, by the way, that in 2002, Ariel Sharon sat with President Bush about a year before, 13 months before we went into Iraq. And he said to him, if you go into Iraq, you're going to have a 10-year quagmire. You're going to have the country split apart into Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds all at war with each other. You will remove Iran's worst enemy, and Iran will become a superpower. That's what's going to happen. And I got that from two people who were with them at the time. That's what's going to happen. So, attacking because we know it's the right thing to do is not the right thing to do unless you've got a day after plan. And the day after plan is the whole world understands there was no choice. And the way to show the whole world there was no choice is to go through with the negotiations and see if you can get to a workable plan without an attack. That's the purpose of the current negotiations.
You know, I'll just say, if you live long enough here, you get to see everything, and that if you had asked me 20 years ago, is JJ going to be here praising Ariel Sharon's brilliance? I don't know that I would have necessarily agreed.
You can read my stuff going back to 1987, when I first began to write. Sharon is not who they make him out to be.
So the point isn't whether an occupation of Iran would be a good idea. I mean, Iraq was a disaster. We're not debating that. My problem with the enrichment, and I think a lot of the people that really know a lot about the nuclear question pose it this way, is that, yeah, in a negotiation between the three of us, if we're going to agree, I get something, you get something, that's American politics. That's, when we split the difference, we're great compromisers.
I want more.
Yeah, exactly. Don't we all? But if you let the Iranians keep their enrichment capacity, we're not 12 years ago, we're in 2014. They've been enriching for a long time. They have a big stockpile. That which they have reduced or sort of converted to oxide powder can be reconverted into nuclear fuel and then ramped up. It doesn't take too long. They've got the technology. They're not that far away. We all know that. If you let them keep their facilities and their centrifuges, sooner or later, you're going to get a bomb. If you think that they will not do it just because they sign a piece of paper or don't sign a piece of paper, they just keep negotiating forever, which is their MO, then you're going to wind up in containment. And then you're going to be rolling the dice about what we're going to get and how bad it's going to be. That was never the point of sanctions. The point of sanctions was to convince the Iranians that the path they were on was not a path that they would be rewarded for, but a path that would lead to disaster. And what we're doing now is, forget what you and I think about it. What we have to be worried is what they think about it. Because they haven't been terribly impressed with President Obama, his entire administration. From the time that he really punted on criticizing their crackdown in Tehran in 2009 to these various negotiations, they think they have his measure. And what I hear about negotiations is not that people are talking good, people should talk, but that where the talking is heading. And if it's heading towards a situation where President Obama is going to be forced, or his successor is going to be forced to deal with the reality of an Iranian bomb, then everything that we've done will have been for nothing, or worse.
JJ, let's think of just something you brought up before. In 1981, if Israel didn't strike the Goldberg reactor, and Iraq actually developed a nuclear bomb, and they went into Kuwait in the Gulf War, it's possible that because they had a bomb, we couldn't have kicked them out of Kuwait, just as a logical conclusion. So if Iran now is in a position of a just-in-time bomb, they're close, and everybody in the world knows it, with Iranian Persian hegemony as its goal, won't we be in a situation where not only will there be proliferation going on amongst the Gulf states, Turkey, Egypt, who knows what, but when they attack another country, they think Bahrain is a province of theirs, Saudi Arabia is an arch enemy. Isn't it really much more about American foreign policy interests here, putting Israel aside? So how would you respond to that?
Look, we agree on the end goal of making sure that Iran does not get a bomb. The question is how to do that. Laying down conditions that cannot be met doesn't get you anywhere. Laying down conditions that we agree on and the rest of the world does not doesn't get you anywhere. Shepherding the whole world for, look, we got the world to agree on UN resolutions with no teeth. It took America re-engaging to get the world to agree on sanctions with teeth. We need to move forward at a pace that can keep Iran isolated and facing the rest of the world, which is the situation right now. No, it would be terrible. By the way, as far as Iraq goes, in 1986, which is 5 years after the bombing, there was a secret negotiation going on between Iraq and Israel. And Iraq was offering to recognize Israel if Israel would get America to switch sides. America, remember, during the 80s was arming Iran. Iraq said, get America to switch sides and we will recognize you. The negotiations got to the point where Israel was saying, recognize us first. Iraq was saying, we'll recognize you after we win the war. And it broke down there. The Reagan administration found out about the negotiations and shut them down because Iraq is evil. You can't negotiate with Iraq, Israel, because Iraq is evil and hates you. There were negotiations with Iraq again in 90 and in 92 and in 2000 in advance of the... So Israel had the measure of Iraq, which was Saddam Hussein is a ruthless dictator who believes in nothing, including anti-Zionism. He doesn't believe in anything. He'd be happy to sign a peace treaty with Israel if he got the right deal. And every time they got anywhere in the negotiations, the first Reagan administration, the Reagan administration, the first Bush administration, and the Clinton administration shut the negotiations down because Iraq is evil. So, no, Israel had a different view of Iraq than it has of Iran. Its view of Iran has always been, they mean what they say. They are dangerous. They're not a tin pot dictator. They have an elected government of millions of fanatic Muslims, and we need to get the world on our side. So that's been the Israeli approach.
So I want to just, before we transition out of Iran, I want to talk about sanctions. You said that we have to have the world with us. Do you believe the president said we'll only have $7 billion in sanctions relief, but many people believe now Iran's actually, was just reported by the IAEA this week, huge amounts of more oil monies and exports going on, and there's many other things going on, that if these negotiations fail, that the Europeans will go back against their economic interests and put them back on and put the screws to them, or is it over this ends of the sanctions regime?
The agreement that was signed in November, which is right here, says that the West will suspend sanctions for 6 months for the duration of the negotiations, renewable. If the negotiations end and there hasn't been an agreement, the sanctions automatically go back into effect.
But the president,
it doesn't take a decision.
But the president gave waivers to the 20 leading trading partners of Iran with the original set of sanctions. Why wouldn't he be able to executive action to...
Why would he? The president's goal... Look, the purpose of the Menendez bill was to add an additional threat. The agreement says, in return for the various things that Iran will stop doing, blah, 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 the U.S. administration, acting consistent with the respective goal, will refrain from imposing new nuclear-related sanctions. According to the interpretation of Iran and of the administration's lawyers, that means that the Menendez bill would break the November agreement, and Iran could go back to the negotiations would be dead. When the administration says Iran would walk away, it's not doing Talmudic interpretation of what psychology Iran, that's the agreement. We agreed not to impose new sanctions. The Menendez bill is interpreted by the lawyers as a form of imposing new sanctions, even though it's 6 months down the road. The sanctions automatically return at the end of the negotiations if there hasn't been a deal.
Jonathan?
The problem here is not, we could spend a lot of time talking about the new sanctions bill sponsored by Senator Menendez and Senator Kirk. Is it a good idea? Does it violate the old agreement? I'm a little more interested in the dynamic of loosening sanctions in the deal, the piece of paper that JJ was just holding. Because what we've been seeing in the last few months, and let's go back, the sanctions that we've been bragging about, you spoke of 20 exemptions. In 2010, when we were already imposing, tough sanctions, what we were told were tough sanctions on Iran, New York Times reported that over 10,000 exemptions had been granted by the Treasury Department to people who wanted to do business with Iran. We were baked into the cake of the sanctions that we had that we were loosening in November. Not talking about anything that would happen now. Was allowing Iran to continue to sell oil to some of its big customers. The problem with what happened in November is not, we have to get everybody together. Yeah, in theory, it would be very good if somehow we can get the Russians, the French, the British, everybody in the EU, Catherine Ashton, to go along with us if we could just go at their pace. The problem is that the dynamic of loosening sanctions is sending a signal both to Iran and to its trading partners that, the tide is out. And what we've been seeing, if you read the economic reports out of Iran, you're not hearing any more reports about, they're strangling, they're dying, it's terrible. It's that their economy is starting to revive. Now, quite frankly, and that they think the sanctions will never come back. They don't, that they believe now that they've got the Americans talking in this way, and they believe that our European partners, it's a vicious cycle. Yes, in theory, the sanctions can only work if the rest of the world goes along with us. But if the rest of the world will never go along with anything that will really stop Iran, what are we talking about? We painted ourselves into a corner. And it's hard to see how we get out of it as long as we're still debating those points.
The point of the deal in November was that the West gets something, which is Iran freezes most of its centrifuges. It doesn't add in new centrifuges, it decommissions, it downgrades half of its 20%. And so the things that the West got, and Iran got a relaxation of sanctions. All negotiations are give and take. Now, of course, if the sanctions are relaxed, their economy will improve. That's why they agreed to go into these talks.
And why would they flee them? Over a legalistic point. I mean, if they are getting something out of this negotiation, indeed, there's no argument here, they got something out of it. I would argue the United States got very little. But if the dynamic of this negotiation is that they've got a lot to gain out of keeping the U.S. talking, what bothers me about the fierce reaction, I mean, we could, you know, whether the new sanctions will really do the trick by itself, that's debatable. But what really troubles me was the fierce reaction from the Obama administration. Oh my God, the Iranians are going to leave. We're going to break faith with them. They're going to be so mad at us. Well, if you have given them something that is their lifeline, which was the whole argument of these negotiations, why would they flee? Well, the point is that maybe they think they've got nothing to lose here. And that's the problem with with painting ourselves into that corner.
They were divided, they are divided. The Revolutionary Guard Corps, which has enormous power, and the whole Ahmadinejad faction, they didn't want to go into negotiations. They wanted to keep enriching. They want to keep those centrifuges spinning until they have a bomb. Half of Iran, the regime is divided, and part of the regime wants to get back into the world community and stop being isolated. And that means allowing the world to watch its nuclear program up close, tight, and verifiable.
Now here's where we have, if not a point of disagreement, but this is a point of debate. How divided is the regime? I mean, you know, I think like a lot of people, maybe some of you, when we start hearing about, you know, the arguments about the hawks and the doves in Tehran, it sounds like the old arguments between the hawks and the doves in the Kremlin, where we were always chasing our tail, trying to, don't make the Russians mad. The bad Russians will stop the good Russians. The regime, when it comes down to it, as Ahmadinejad knows all too well, the regime is the supreme leader, and he calls the tune. So I think getting ourselves too worked up, and this was, you know, partly I think is deceptive, because the secret outreach that led to the November agreement began before Hassan Rouhani was elected president in their, you know, so-called democratic election last summer. Focusing on Rouhani, who is no moderate, not by any definition. The idea that, you know, do a lot of the Iranian people don't want to be where they are? Sure. Does the regime really want to moderate in any meaningful way? I don't think that's a very defensible point. I hope no one in the Obama administration really believes that.
Okay, we can keep going on Iran forever, but I think we really fleshed out a lot.
We will if we let us.
So, you know, I'm going to just change the order a little bit, because I think you got very passionate about the boycott, divestment, sanctions against Israel, and my experience with the Israeli leadership was that it's something very much front and center. So, Jonathan, you just spoke, so I'm going to give this to JJ. JJ, do you believe, like Peter Weiner, that we should boycott, divest, sanction goods from Judea and Samaria, i.e. West Bank, as the Europeans do, the Danish bank does, the Swedish bank? Are you in favor of, to get rid of the occupation, to boycott Israeli goods from Judea and Samaria?
I think it's ridiculous. First of all, the American Jewish community needs to stand with Israel. And once we start getting involved in even partial boycotts, then we're only legitimizing this movement, which, as both of you quite accurately described, is a movement to unmake the state of Israel. The BDS movement, which goes on in American campuses and European campuses, in some European trade unions, is a movement to strangle Israel until it no longer exists as a Jewish state. They want to create a binational state, or a Palestinian Arab state with whatever Jewish population is left. But the sanctions that Israel is seriously afraid of right now are not the BDS movement. It's the Danish, the Dutch, the various European companies that have cut off relations with Israeli banks and companies that do business in the West Bank. These are companies that have been doing business with Israel for years, and it's now reached the point where they're saying, stop building new settlements. You say you're in favor of a two-state solution. Show it by discontinuing, expanding into the territory. That's how they interpret it. Israel knows that the European move to cut off products in the settlements, or companies that deal in the settlements, is about the settlements and the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and not about Israel proper. Bear in mind that a few years ago, the Europeans demanded to begin labeling products from the settlements as not being from Israel. Israel has a free trade agreement with Europe. That's not an anti-Semitic thing to do, to allow Israel to be a de facto part of the European economic community. But it doesn't have a free trade agreement with the territories that are under Israeli military control. And Israel agreed to that labeling because it understood that what the Europeans want is to deal with Israel within the borders that the Israeli government itself recognizes. The territories outside the Israel proper, as it's called, outside the Green Line, are not considered Israel in Israeli law. They are considered territories under Israeli military control. Disputed, occupied, call it what you will, they're not the state of Israel. And Europe has an agreement with the state of Israel. The United States has agreements with the state of Israel. The UJA does not fund projects over the Green Line because its charter says that it is the United Israel Appeal, which is the part that sends money to the Jewish Agency, is chartered to promote projects in Israel. And the State Department interprets Israel the same way the Israeli government does as defined by the Green Line. That's why the UJA. Israel excludes Jerusalem, the United States doesn't. But the point is that the real serious sanctions are not the sanctions by these crackpots at Berkeley who want to unmake the state of Israel. They're the sanctions by the bankers in Denmark who want Israel to follow through and reach an agreement with the Palestinians and pull out.
Jonathan, didn't Israel just acquiesce to that with the Horizon deal, basically acknowledging that? So what's wrong with that?
Well, I'm not going to debate the wisdom of that agreement. First of all, let me say I agree with everything that JJ said about trying to draw distinctions between various kinds of boycotts. This is a very important issue within our community, within our communities across this country. And we have to really address this and not get sucked into that by people, whether they're well-meaning, because of their concern for the Palestinians or their stated concerns for Israel, to get sucked into selective boycotts because it all ends in one place. And the fact is, a lot of the people with whom they're making common cause over this, consider Tel Aviv to be just as much of a settlement as the most remote hilltop community, bunch of trailers in the West Bank. Let's not go there. And quite frankly, that's an issue that is coming up more and more within JCRCs around the country, within communities, especially where, we're dealing, this is an important issue for us, as much as I agree, yes, European banks can do more damage than crackpots at Berkeley or at Swarthmore or any other place. Within our community, within our ability to function as a community, if we are going to, I believe in a big tent, people who want to exclude, left-wing groups like J Street, I think that's crazy, it's stupid. I've shared platforms, I disagree with them, I share platforms with them. That's not the point. If you're a Zionist, if you're for Israel, no matter what you think about Israeli policies, you're not my enemy. I may disagree with you, you're not my enemy. But if we're letting into the tent groups that are avowed supporters of BDS, we are undermining the ability of our communities to function coherently as supporters of Israel. Now, as to, Israel's problem vis-a-vis the settlements, the problem with this, JJ's right, the Europeans are for now limiting, they're saying, oh, we don't want to deal with the settlements, don't deal with this, don't build more settlements, which is, of course, a misnomer because there aren't new settlements really going up, they're just houses going up within existing settlements, or frankly, within existing Jewish neighborhoods in Jerusalem that have been there for 40 years, which are things that at times the Obama administration has taken as a grave insult. Well, let's reframe the argument. Let's understand that even this so-called right-wing government, my information is that Tzipi Livni, in talks with the Palestinians, has put 90% of the West Bank on the table right now. If the Palestinians had wanted a Palestinian state in the West, in almost all of the West Bank, they could have had one 14 years ago, or 6 years ago, or tomorrow. Because no Israeli government, and I say this as someone who is not exactly identified with the Israeli, with the Jewish left, no Israeli government will ever turn down a genuine offer of peace based on recognition of Israel as a Jewish state, end of the right of return, peace forever. And if that means giving up much of the West Bank, the Israeli government's going to do it because the Israeli people want peace. Now the problem is, we mentioned Arik Sharon, is that we have the Gaza example. A lot of Israelis, the majority of Israelis, the Israeli left-wing parties were not decimated, they were practically destroyed in a series of recent elections, because after what happened in Oslo, which ended in the Second Intifada, after the withdrawal from Gaza, there isn't a lot of belief within Israel that any territory that Israel gives up will not be used as a terror base, as used to continue the conflict on less advantageous terms to Israel. If the Palestinians want a Palestinian state, they can have a Palestinian state, whether a lot of people in Israel like it or not. They're going to have it. The question is, they've said no consistently. The problem is, the Palestinian Authority isn't likely to accept it even now. We could twist ourselves like pretzels. That's not going to happen. Focusing on building within settlements, for the most part, that everybody knows that Israel could keep, and even President Obama has tacitly agreed Israel could keep in the event of an agreement. To say that building there is preventing peace is absolute nonsense, and it's off the question.
Okay. So, I've been told by the powers that be that we're going to have a Q&A, and I think there are microphones on the right and on the left.
Yes. We have special microphones on each side. Please let them have a question. They only accept questions. These microphones give answers and commentary. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left in honor of about 29 trips to Israel. We'll go to 11:29. Maybe sneak a few more minutes in at the end. We do have some closing remarks, so if you'll all stay with us, we appreciate it.
So please, just questions and no statements so we get as many people going. First question.
Thank you very much.
Just say your name.
Barney Kaplan. I happen to be an ophthalmologist, by the way. Doing a great job.
So is Bashir Assad. So.
Yes, I know. I'd like to go from one existential threat to another. That's the existential threat here among the American Jewish community. Because all these issues that we have discussed are almost moot if we don't have a strong, organized, and most importantly, educated Jewish community. The Pew study tells us that we're in a little bit of trouble. Now, I refer to this basically because of what I read in JJ's column. I haven't read it since 1987, but I did read your column 2 days ago.
They changed JJ?
Yes. The question is, you referred to a government program of $1.4 billion to support the American Jewish community's issue of Jewish identity. Can you expand upon that, and do you have any possible solutions of what we can do to improve ourselves?
You may have read also, I watered down my language, but they have decided to spend $1.4 billion, and they had an open mic 3-day. They're looking for ideas for what to do now. They're willing to spend the money. They haven't figured out exactly what would help. They don't know.
if any of you have ideas, contact the Jewish Agency, because they really are desperate and they don't know.
Do you have any ideas?
Do I have any ideas?
And you have ideas to enhance our Jewish education and make us...
To enhance our Jewish education. First of all, I make the observation, my kids are day school graduates. Approximately 20% of Jewish kids in America are in day schools, which includes about 98% of Orthodox and 5% of non-Orthodox. Non-Orthodox Jews, who are the demographic problem, are not going to go to day schools. We need to figure out how to make afternoon schools and Sunday schools work. We need to figure out how to make kids want to be Jewish. Now, the hint in in all of the surveys that have happened recently, including Pew, is that 95–97% of American Jews, including those with one Jewish parent, including those with a Jewish father, are proud to be Jewish. And there was a study that the Jewish Outreach Institute did of adult children of intermarriage. What is your religion? Is it Jewish? 28% said yes. What do you like best about being Jewish? 70–80% had an answer. Their religion isn't Jewish. That's what the Pew survey showed us. There's an awful lot of people who regard themselves as part of the Jewish community, but do not follow Jewish religion. We need to figure out, they follow Seinfeld, they follow, there's a lot of things they like. They follow Tikkun Olam, they go volunteer, they're working on environmental stuff, and when you ask them, why do you do that? Over and over you hear the same thing, it's Jewish values. How do we tie that to the, how do we enlist those kids? How do we bring them back?
John? Well, you've opened up where we could spend the next 2 hours discussing that, and then the next 20 hours after that as well. On one foot, I think we have to continue more of what we've been trying to do, but not enough in terms of education, trips to Israel. Yes, strengthen the synagogue schools, all of those things. Those are all very important. But we have, a deep, deep problem within our community. In part, it's just a symptom, but it's also an outcome, and that is intermarriage. And what Pew told us is that the overwhelming majority of people who, the children of people who intermarry aren't given a Jewish education, ultimately intermarry themselves. You do the math. We're talking about, the demographic collapse of the non-Orthodox community. And until, or if, we can do, in addition to all the good things that we know we have to do and we don't do enough of, we can change the conversation about why, it may not be possible. Sometimes there is no good answer to these questions. I don't believe that, people can, come back to the Jewish community because, they like Seinfeld, because, they like the idea of Tikkun Olam. I mean, back in the 90s, a lot of the Jewish community was very invested in trying to create green ways for people to be Jewish, and whatever trend was out there. And the truth is, if you're interested in being an environmentalist, you're an environmentalist. You're not going to become Jewish to be an environmentalist. We get diverted from basic facts. The fact is, unless we create a Jewish community that is based on faith and identification, we will assimilate ourselves in large measure out of business. And this is a very difficult subject because it affects every family. We're living in a free society, that's the whole point. Intermarriage happened not because the non-Jews are out to destroy us, but because they love us, they want to marry us. And, unless we address that, in the end, we're not going to do much about this.
Next question.
Yes, I'm going to make it rather brief because I think as many people as possible to speak. This is the first time we have actually had BDS be brought forward as an existential threat. So my question very quickly is to you, how do we combat it? How do we stop it from spreading? How do we prevent it from becoming the norm?
Jonathan, stop.
Great question. On one foot, speak truth to power. You talk back. You speak up. You know, everybody knows what are we going to do to help our children survive in colleges when they go there. Yes, you give them information, but you try to inspire them with some courage to talk back, not to be intimidated, not to be convinced that to be trendy or to be liberal means to look at Israel in a certain way. To speak of the cause of Israel as a just cause. Not to concede the high moral ground, because we've got the high moral ground. And because once you start going down that slippery slope, you're not going to win. And yes, and I also believe, and this is a point of some disagreement within the community, I believe we have to draw a very bright line between us and the BDSers. Our goal isn't to make nice with them. Our goal is to call them out for what they are, which is a movement bent on Israel's destruction, which is by its very nature prejudicial and, I think, a form of anti-Semitism.
Next question.
It's actually a perfect follow-up to the question just posed. Sanctions, when used with respect to Iran, is a government strategy for different governments around the world. The BDS movement is a populist strategy. It's virtually identical to impose sanctions, but it comes from the ground up. Israel, at some point, was the darling of the left, was the darling of the liberals, and the populist movement was the support. Where did Israel lose the populist support, and how do we now recapture populist support as a way of defeating the BDS movement?
By the way, the Gallup poll this week said 71% of Americans, up from 66%, have a favorable view of Israel. So it's not all terrible, because I think everything I've said today has been terrible, so there's some positive. JJ?
Well, yes, the overwhelming majority of the American people favor Israel over the Palestinians and identify with Israel. It declines with declining age. The future is not on Israel's side. BDS, as framed on American campuses, as I said before, is not a serious problem for Israel because it's not going anywhere. European sanctions are a serious problem, and the solution to that, as well as the solution to the growing disfavor that Israel is encountering among younger generations all over the world, and among non-Christians all over the world, is to make the damn peace agreement. Now, just one last point. The negotiations between Omer and Abbas in 2008 halted around basically two issues. Ariel. It's a city in the middle of the West Bank that, from the Palestinians' point of view, is a bone in their throat. It cuts the West Bank in half. Israel says it will never abandon Ariel. The Palestinians said there will never be peace if Ariel stays there. The other issue is the refugees. Israel was offering, Omer offered 5,000 refugees in a symbolic right of return, end of story. We recognize that the Palestinians lost their homes. We're going to take 5,000 back, and that's the end of it. The counteroffer from the Palestinians, which they had agreed on in their discussions, it came out in the Palestine papers, Al Jazeera leaked them and published them. They wanted 150,000, end of story. They don't want 6 million refugees, they don't want 4 million, they wanted 150,000. They were that far apart. Ariel is a problem, the refugees are a problem, and now the Jordan River is a problem. There is a deal to be had. 70% of the 70 members of Knesset, between 70 and 78, are in favor of that deal. But the majority of the current cabinet is against it. There are about 40 to 45 members of the current Knesset who are absolutely dead set against what Jonathan says all Israelis want, and they make up the majority of the current coalition. That's what the coalition is, the minority of Israelis who voted against giving up the territories, breaking up the greater land of Israel. So the way to solve these problems is to do what everybody keeps on saying. It couldn't be clearer. Get out of the territories. Give the Palestinians, not because it's better for Israeli security. It gives Israel a border. It puts them who don't like Israel on the other side. Let them incite away as long as they know they're going to get the bejesus bombed out of them if they make any trouble, like Hamas learned, be finished. Go away.
I've been told by the powers that be that if the last three questions, each person asks the question and you guys can pick and choose how you want to respond. So 1, 2, 3.
Hi. Jonathan had said that Iran probably has a measure of the United States. In my opinion, the elephant in the room is right next to Israel, and that's Syria. Iran, through its proxies Hezbollah and its own Revolutionary Guard, decimating Syria in opposition to the United States and undermining the United States, showing very bad faith.
What's the question?
The question is, does it have the measure of the United States? And now in the Iranian nuclear negotiations, it will never abide by any agreement.
Next question.
My question is, how do we as Jewish people and Americans deal with 1,400 years of Islamic culture attempting to obliterate us? How can we trust them now? Why should we trust them now?
Next question.
Just a quick question again about the BDS. Just this morning on my way here, we came from Philadelphia, all the way to Philadelphia. It took us an hour to get here. Anyway, on the program this morning at 7:70 with the rabbi and the deacon, there was a diplomat from the state of Israel in New York, and he was talking about the BDS movement and the Presbyterians. The Presbyterians now have a conference that 75% of them are in favor of the legislation to continue and to build the BDS movement. How can we engage the 25% that are not in favor, because the gentlemen believe that it would lead to anti-Israel, anti-Zionist movements internationally, and again lead to Nazism all over the world.
So you guys can pick how you want to answer, but BDS seems to have struck a strong chord in this audience. Jonathan?
Okay, well, I was taking notes. Excuse me. Let me first say, give a quick answer to the gentleman who asked the questions of why Israel used to be the darling of, and now is treated as a villain. Well, the difference is Israel used to be seen as a potential victim. There was an iron law of modern history that dead Jews are very popular people. Everybody's very concerned about the Holocaust now, not so much when it was happening. Israel would get very popular if it was in a worse condition. You know, in 1967, where it was in a very, very parlous security situation, Israel had a lot of sympathy. Fortunately, unfortunately, instead of succumbing, it survived. And winners don't always look as sympathetic. So, we've often been forced into the position, which would you rather have, everybody's sympathy or to be alive? I think Israelis choose life and survival, and ultimately I think that informs a lot of other things. Let me skip to the Presbyterian question. It's very important, something I've written about a lot in the last couple of years, and just last week with the latest outrage from the Presbyterian Church USA, not its specific denominations. They have, the Protestants have more denominations than we Jews, and we have to be careful. There are some Presbyterians that are not enemies of Israel, but the largest Presbyterian Church USA is. And what do we do about it? We call them out. And more to the point, we reach out to members of churches and pastors that we know, who are our neighbors, and we tell them, do you understand that your movement is declaring war on the Jewish people and on the right of the Jewish people to a homeland? And we try to get them involved. In New York, the JCRC has done some great work. My friend Ethan Felsen from the JCPA has done a lot of great work. But quite frankly, within the cadre of the activists that run that church, they're like a lot of Jewish organizations too. They have a staff and a mailing list. The people that run these organizations of many mainline churches have been captured by the hard anti-Zionist left. And we have to find ways of getting members of those churches to take their churches back. And if not, then we have to do what many communities around the country have done, which is very hard for JCRCs, because it's in your DNA to do community relations with people and to reach out to everybody. But as long as they are waging war on the Jewish people, not just Israel, in the way that they are, we have to say no business as usual. We will not do anything with you. We will put you in peril. Now, how hard is that? Well, for the activists at the head of these organizations, they don't care because they don't like us anyway. But for many of the pastors and congregants, they don't like the idea of being at war with the Jews, and we have to make that clear. Now, finally, about 1,400 years of Islamic culture. Well, the truth is we have to find ways of making peace with Israel. Now, where I disagree with my friend JJ is that I don't think the deal is there to be had. I think that's a complete misreading of Palestinian politics. It's a complete misreading of where Abbas is, and I think it's delusional on Olmert's part. There was much about his administration which was delusional. And you have to remember, we think George W. Bush was unpopular. At one point, when I was interviewing him in 2007, his approval ratings in Israel were actually within the margin of error. So theoretically, nobody supported him, including himself. So the problem, I don't think the deal is there to be had, and I don't think it's not just because a few people in the cabinet don't want to make a deal and Abbas will make peace and everything will be fine. We have to understand this is a long struggle. It's been going on for a while, and the odds are it's not going to be over soon, and that's hard on us. It's hard on us because we don't want to have to keep issuing the same arguments, be put in the same position. But the fact is, what we as a community, and this is where I'll close, what do we need? We need the stamina. We need the courage. We need the belief in the justice of our cause, the cause of Israel, the cause of Zionism, and the courage of our convictions to speak up for it, even when it's not popular, even when it puts us sometimes in a minority, although quite frankly, it doesn't put us within a minority in this country. We have friends everywhere across this country. We have to realize that, reach out, and work together, which is why AIPAC is so successful and why our community will continue to go from strength to strength, just as this community will continue to go from strength to strength, because we're going to keep our courage, and we're not, they think we're going to get tired. They think the Israelis will get tired. Guess what? They're not going to. We'll see who gets tired first, and it's not going to be us.
As usual, I agree with almost everything Jonathan says. I will simply focus on one thing that he said that I disagree with, which you can guess what it is. There are currently 18 living former heads of the Shin Bet, the Mossad, and the IDF. 18 are currently alive who headed those services. Of those 18, one disagrees with the scenario that I laid out. And that's why you're hearing so much noise from them now. The Gatekeepers movies, the Mayor Dagan speaking out about what an idiotic idea it is to bomb Iran, and so on and so on, because they see a country which is actually a political system that is resisting what they thought they were moving towards. Now, one of the situations here, I agree with Jonathan, we need to be strong. And by the way, bear in mind, there are actually more Jews than Presbyterians in the United States. They're not that big a deal. They're honorable. There are more Presbyterians than Jews in Congress. You talk about overrepresented. I think there's 50-something Presbyterians in Congress, but they're 3% of the population. And again, there are many people who are going along with that because they're troubled by the way that Israel is portrayed in the media as wanting to continue colonizing the poor Palestinians. They need to understand from us, no, we don't favor that. We agree with the Israeli army, with the Israeli prime minister, with the Israelis who are working toward peace. There is a peace deal to be had. If it takes forever, that's because the Middle East is complicated. But Israel believes in peace, and Israel believes in living side by side as neighbors with its neighbors. They need to believe that we mean that. so that the hardcore won't stop, but they won't have the support. You dry up the water that the fish is swimming in. Finally, on Syria. Last thing, Syria, nobody has believed since the beginning, nobody. Israeli intelligence and American intelligence have thought from the beginning that the Free Syrian Army is a fake. They're wimps, they're losers. That this is going to be a war between Assad and his army and Al-Qaeda. And that's what it's turning out to be. Israel would like to see them fight on for as long as possible. However, given the choice, both Israel and American intelligence, the CIA, would rather see Assad in power. Assad, like the other, Assad kept the border with the Golan quiet for 40 years for the Assad father and son. They signed a deal in 75 and they kept it. Egypt signed a deal and they kept it. The Muslim world, which by the way did not have 1,400 years of bottomless hate, 1,400 years of treating Jews not as well as it treated Muslims, second-class citizens, but they didn't have the massacres. Christianity, the Christian world. The Christian world. What was the Christian world like in the Middle Ages? Where did the Jews go from Spain when they were kicked out? To the Muslim world. Because it was better. There's a novel by Aleph Bet Yoshua, one of Israel's great novels, called A Journey to the End of the Millennium. Read it. Read the comparison of Jews in Europe and Jews in the Muslim world in the Middle Ages. They got kicked out of Spain. That's a religious problem for them, just like getting kicked out of Palestine is. But they got used to Spain, and they will get used to Palestine as long as Israel is strong and as long as it has support around the world. We need to show the world, the Muslim world, and the rest of the world that agree or disagree, Jews stand with Israel, and Israel will not be defeated. And the Muslim world has got to get used to it. Like it, don't like Jews, don't like Jews. You stay on your side, we're on our side. Leave us alone or you're going to be sorry.
So I think we've all been privileged to see the spectrum of true Zionists of opinion here. I think you've gotten it in depth. More than 99% of people who are Israel advocates and want to be and learn about the Middle East. I'll hand this over to Benedon.
Jonathan and JJ, you were terrific. Thank you for truly enlightening me. And Eric, you helped Rose put us all in a difficult position as moderator. And we thank you so much for being here with us in our community. And I think I can now say that you are an honorary member of our South Jersey JCRC family. Thanks to Brandon Cohn, Program Coordinator, and David Snyder, JCRC Executive Director, for everything you do every day in our community. The list is endless. Lastly, I hope you will indulge me as I, too, would like to congratulate my husband, Bob, on his most deserving award. Although I have recused myself from the nomination and selection process, I'm unable to withhold my admiration, respect, and love for Bob. No one knows better than I do the number of hours in any given week that he spends on Israel-related activity. So mazel tov to you, dear, on a truly merited honor. We clearly heard this morning about the many challenges Israel continues to face in her struggle to live in peace, while at the same time providing security for her citizens. I know that together we in the South Jersey pro-Israel community can do our part by being more engaged in what is happening in Israel and advocating on her behalf. Whether it be around the JCC, on local college campuses, or in the halls of Congress, we need more people to feel more comfortable talking about and advocating on behalf of Israel, on behalf of Israel's right to exist as a Jewish democratic state. So with that said, just two quick reminders. Please complete both sides of the JCRC interest survey and contribution form. David told me to smile when I say that. And second, please take a few of the Israel Advocacy team flyers with you. and give them out to any family or friends who have teens living at home. I guarantee you they won't be disappointed. It's a wonderful program. We held it last year, and it was very well received. On behalf of the JCRC and the Israel Advocacy Initiative Committee, I thank you all for being here. We look forward to seeing you at future JCRC events, and enjoy the rest of your day.